Yo! Somebody come try this, cousin!
Yeah, right!
That was perfect.
There you go, chef.
Recently, I spent almost an entire day thinking about this place, this fictional restaurant in Chicago, and the people in it. Would Marcus get the recognition he deserved for his baked goods or give up? What would become of Sydney's aspirations and talents? Would Richie crash and burn? And would Carmy, who was trying his best to hold this place together, learn how to cope with the death of his brother? And what would happen to the restaurant? I kept thinking about this place and these people as I was going about my day because that morning I had just watched episode 7 of The Bear, an episode that brought the season's boiling tensions to a head.
We're firing! 76 beefs, 34 chickens, okay?
The Bear snuck up on me. It's an unpretentious, unassuming show about a few people working in a kitchen in Chicago trying to make ends meet, and yet it packs a lot of punch into a small space. Let's take a look at what makes it so intense, and more importantly, why we care. This video is sponsored by Mubi. From the moment you enter the mouth of the Bear, formed by the structure of this bridge, you're thrown into the intense world of a restaurant kitchen. It's been over a decade since I worked a food service job, but it's a uniquely intense environment, and the Bear captures that intensity incredibly well. Let's take a look at one 55-second segment and see how the Bear creates this intensity without descending into confusion for the audience.
Chefs, we gotta sharpen our knives when we get a sec.
We gotta sharpen your brain when we get a second. You've been here for 2 weeks. We've been having money problems for 2 weeks. 1 + 1 = you're an Bobby
Don't call
Flay.
me Bobby Flay. Sydney, you stir that pot for me, please, chef.
You want a cartouche?
Please, thank you, chef.
cartouche.
What's our best day here?
5.
Okay, Ibrahim, get me a pot for the jardiniere. So if we do 6, that will get us through the week, right? So, ball breaker.
Just make it easy and make the f***ing
Don't
spaghetti.
say spaghetti. All these knives are dull.
Spaghetti's the biggest seller con. That shit was straight up fire.
Straight up done now, chef, behind.
Yeah, but why?
Because f***ing 11 Madison Park head over here, he couldn't figure it out.
Housekeeping, chef.
Again, what the f*** are you saying? Anyone understand what he's saying?
Housekeeping means you have to clean your stations because this place is f***ing gross. I refer to everybody as chef because it's a sign of respect, and I never said I couldn't figure out the spaghetti. I said it doesn't make any sense on this menu, so it is done. The end.
There are a lot of elements that go into making this moment feel intense. Some are more obvious than others. There's the background music. Dropping that away already makes the scene more mellow.
You've been here for 2 weeks. We've been having money problems for 2 weeks.
There's also the intensity of the actors' performances and the fast editing. But there are two elements that I want to examine specifically, the cinematography and the way conflict is layered throughout the scene. Let's look at the cinematography first. Look at the compositions throughout this moment. The important thing is that it feels chaotic, but in actuality, it's fairly precise. Shots are usually dirtied by foreground elements or movement, but it's not random noise or shakiness, and these messier elements usually frame a single, easily identifiable subject. The scene is structured almost entirely in close-up, which gives the whole environment a cramped feeling, but which also keeps you inside the action as if you're observing everything as one of the members of the kitchen. We never get to step back visually for a breath into a clean medium or wide shot as the audience. While all this is happening, the characters, or at least a few of them at this stage, also have to remain focused on the actual food prep, so that's where our attention is directed as well. And hang on a second, that's an actual veggie stuck to Carmy's knife in the middle of all this chaos, which means he's actually chopping vegetables down there. Wait, you're telling me that there were no hand models for this entire show, so all of these insert shots are actually the actors? But where this section, and I think the show, really shines is the way it builds conflict by layering a bunch of problems on top of each other. We're immediately confronted with a problem, the dull knives.
Chefs, we gotta sharpen our knives when we get a sec.
We gotta sharpen your brain when we get a second.
Then very quickly we get a second problem, the lack of money that's being made by the restaurant.
You've been here for 2 weeks. We've been having money problems for 2 weeks.
This problem is the central problem of the scene and the whole show. This is the problem that generates the conflict in the scene. The problem is converted into conflict because Richie and Carmy each think there is a different solution to this problem. Now watch how every practical sub-problem in the scene relates back to that central conflict in some way. Richie thinks the problem is the way Carmy runs the kitchen.
1 + 1 = you're an
Carmy says don't call me Bobby. He wants him to call him Chef
Don't call me Bobby Flay.
because he thinks the solution to the problem is changing the way the kitchen is run.
Sydney, stir that pot for me, please, chef.
Sydney asks if Carmy wants a cartouche,
Want a cartouche?
and Richie's confusion about this is directly related to what he thinks the problem is.
Please, thank you, chef.
Again, the way Carmy is trying to run things. They go back to arguing about how to fix the money problem,
It's our best day here.
5.
and a new problem arises, Carmy's need for a pot,
Okay, Ibrahim, get me a pot for the jardiniere.
which he doesn't have because the way the kitchen is being run.
So if we do 6, that will get us through the week, right? So, ball breaker.
Just make it easy
Richie then suggests spaghetti as a solution to the money problems,
and make the fucking
Don't
spaghetti.
say spaghetti.
but the problem of dull knives was never solved, and Carmy takes action to try to resolve this while the characters keep arguing about spaghetti, which Carmy doesn't want to make because it doesn't fit with the way he wants to run the kitchen.
Park it over here. He couldn't figure it out.
Then Carmy raises another issue, the lack of cleanliness in the environment,
Housekeeping, chef.
and the way he goes about this triggers Richie again.
Again, what the are you saying? Anyone understand what he's saying?
Housekeeping means you have to clean your stations because this place is fucking gross.
And while this argument continues, we watch Sydney make the cartouche, and the scene ends on Carmy's explanation for why he doesn't want to make the spaghetti. This 55-second segment illustrates the way the show creates intensity by throwing a series of interlocking and stacking problems at us, like you'd experience in a real kitchen. But you're able to follow the thread and you're not confused because all of these smaller problems help illustrate the central conflict of the scene, which is in turn fueled by the central problem of the show. And the conflict is created not arbitrarily, but by differences in how the characters want to solve the problem, differences which are motivated by each character's development and overall arc in the show. So in this way, little actions like grabbing a fresh knife or making a cartouche add to the visual intensity of the scene, but are ultimately related to the central conflict of the show. And this is just 55 seconds. This kind of thing continues throughout most of this episode and most of the episodes in the show. If you've seen the show, and I mentioned long take, the 17-minute take that comprises most of episode 7 probably comes to mind. But did you notice the long takes that came before that? One of my favorite long takes from the show is actually this one, an unassuming shot that holds for 3 minutes as Richie takes a call from his wife and talks to his daughter.
She crying again? What'd you say?
It's a humanizing moment for Richie, who's been an unhinged jerk so far throughout the show, and it's the first time Sydney is seeing him in a vulnerable position. Holding here on this moment instead of cutting draws us into the intimacy of the moment and puts us in the slightly voyeuristic position Sydney's in. Because there's no cut, Sydney's presence listening in somehow feels more palpable throughout the scene. The show uses these longish takes fairly often when it breaks away from the intensity of the kitchen and finds our characters in a more vulnerable place. There's one when Cicero is telling Carmy about his father, there's one when Richie apologizes to his wife, and a big one when Carmy finally opens up at Al-Anon about his brother. Using long takes for these moments really creates a strong contrast between them and the intensity of the conflict in the kitchen. In these examples, it's not really the length of the take, but the choice not to cut that creates the effect. One example of why not cutting can make such a difference is in this shot, where Tina is struggling with a new mashed potatoes recipe. She burns this sauce, carries it to the sink, and when she comes back, there's another sauce prepped by Sydney already ready to go. Not cutting here preserves the sense of the passage of time in this moment, which is crucial because the audience needs to feel, like Tina, just how quickly and effortlessly Sydney saved the day. It's a moment that's an important part of the arc for Tina coming to respect Sydney. And if you cut here and made the amount of time that it took Sydney to replace Tina's ruined sauce ambiguous, you suddenly lose an important part of that scene and Tina's arc as a character. What I love about the use of these long takes, and this applies to the stunning long take in episode 7, is that they don't feel showy or forced. They're deployed in moments that make sense, When I was watching episode 7, it took half the episode before I even realized what was happening, because I was invested in the characters and the scene, not in the filmmaking. Other shows have pulled off more technically impressive single-take episodes, but this one to me never feels forced or gimmicky. It feels perfectly in place for what the story needs to convey, and in my opinion, that wins out over technical prowess any day. Which brings me to the point I want to close on, because what impressed me most about The Bear was not all the technical proficiency when it comes to cinematography or editing. Those things are definitely there, but I didn't even notice them really the first time I was watching the show because I was caught up in the interpersonal conflict and drama. You can create all the intensity you want through sound design, editing, and camera work, but if the audience doesn't care about what's happening to the characters, it's not going to feel intense. You won't be invested in whether the characters will pull it together because you don't care about them. The reason episode 7 feels so intense isn't really because of the long take. It's because in that episode, so many different points of conflict that have been clearly developed throughout the show suddenly come to a head all at once. Tina bringing her son to the kitchen creates conflict, but it isn't just a random plot point to create intensity and conflict in this scene. It's the culmination of her character arc, revealing that she now sees this kitchen as a place where she and her son can learn valuable skills. Earlier in the season, we became invested in Tina coming to respect Sydney's skills, and now the payoff of that character arc is what's causing conflict. This is the case for each character, and what I love about this show is that it illustrates that you don't need these huge, complicated gestures or scenarios to develop character arcs and motivation. Marcus's arc is developed with fairly minimal screen time because the show is careful not to waste characters' actions. Everything they do tells us something about them and helps us to understand what motivates their behavior. Things we've been rooting for the characters to do that we're invested in because the show took the time to develop the characters' interests and motivations are now blowing up in their faces, and it makes it hard to watch that happen. When it all comes crashing down, it does so not because the characters' goals are at odds with each other. They all want to make good food and for the restaurant to succeed. It happens because they're trying to fix the problem in different ways. They're all looking past each other instead of working together. The show doesn't just have the intensity of sensory overload. The Bear is intense because it's technically proficient at showing intense things happening to characters it's made us care about. A movie that uses not cutting to great dramatic effect is Lee Chang-dong's Korean masterpiece, Burning. This is one of those movies that really grabs you and pulls you in on the first watch, but really unfolds with even greater depth and complexity as you rewatch it. And it's available right now in the US on Mubi, my sponsor for this video. Mubi is an online streaming cinema that handpicks a curated collection of films from around the globe. They have the best, most unique selection of independent, classic, art house, and indie films from all around the world. Their library is always fresh. There's a brand new film every day with an explanation of why you should check it out. Mubi is just hands down one of the best resources right now on the internet that's making amazing and unique cinema available to people around the world. You can check it out right now with your 30-day extended free trial when you go to mubi.com/ThomasFlight. That's mubi.com/ThomasFlight. I definitely recommend checking out Burning or just explore the amazing library and find something that looks interesting to you. Click the link on the screen right now to get your extended free trial, and thanks again to Mubi for sponsoring this video.